Welcome one all, my name is Tawess and today we are doing something specific. We are painting a pair of mechs. Okay, that was not particularly specific, but that is what we're doing today. And it is the Stinger and the Valkyrie, a pair of mechs initially design-wise borrowed from the Macross / Robotech series. And well, I thought that if they're now are from the Robotech series, how about we paint them up as a pair of Robotech lookalikes? Now, as you can see on the screen, I have now put which colors will be used, and you can always see the color being used currently in the upper left corner. Some people have been asking what paints I'm using, and this is always Army Painter unless otherwise noted. So, you will have a reference for the color in the left corner. Now, for those who don't know, in the beginning of time, 100 years ago, Battletech, as it was starting up, took a shortcut sort of by borrowing licensing designs from a lot of mechas series, Dogram, Macross and others. This didn't turn out particularly well because licensing back then wasn't as structured as today. So, these mechs were redesigned. That's why they no longer resembles the... it's called the Valkyrie fighter in that game. It's a game, that series. I can't remember. I think they are the VF1s anyway. The new design is a lot better. It's more individual. They actually look a bit different because back then they were all the same. They were looking pretty much the same. Some minor line work differences, but otherwise they were the same design. So that's a quick history. If you want a more in-depth history, go to sarna.net and look for the unseen information. So, what we're doing now is basically slapping a layer of spaceship exterior on these to get a good solid off-white-ish, greyish layer. They have been primed beforehand, so it's not paint on bare plastic. People get angry when I do that. They have been primed, I promise. And the idea here is that in the show, these mechas are white, but white is a difficult color to get looking good because pure white is often too white. So this is a good off-white. It's a slight blue tint to it. It works very well for what we're doing. And yeah, I hope the new setup works better than before, because a problem I had before was that the camera was too close, so I tended to pull the model off camera a lot. It will still happen, but we're trying to get better. Anyway, so as you can see, both are now primed and proper and base coated. And we'll be going out in a dark tone just to get some lines highlighted. Now, in my mind, if we're going to talk a little bit about the idea here now, because these mechs are definitely references to a existing franchise, and I like to poke the fun out because Harmony Gold, which technically didn't do anything wrong per se, they had a fully valid license and they had the right to do what they did, but they still, in my mind, acted like spoiled children. They would, for many years, just block any use of these designs. Transformers had the same problem. The Jetfire character was based on VF1 Fighter 2, so they had to change that. But in essence, the idea here is to stick it to them a little bit, because I think it's funny. Immature, I know, but you know, sometimes you just have to roll with it. So in my mind, if I'm going to put this into game as this, they will be Hauptmann, I think it's called Hauptmann, Royce Fokker, and Lieutenant Richard Jaeger, because Roy Fokker, Rick Hunter, it works. Of course, it will be a pair of former stunt pilots. They joined the Luren Alliance Armed Forces, intended to be pilots for airplanes, but it turned out they were better as mech pilots. So they, well, had their sojourn in the military, but didn't really fit in. So when they had opportunity, they struck out on their own, and well, now they're mercenaries for hire. And it's a much of a story, or a very good story. So now we have the mechs washed. So it's time to go over them again, picking up all the raised areas in the spaceship exterior gray, just to make sure that you get it popping, because the dark wash does bring everything down a lot. Now, Armor Painter's washes are really good. The coverage is excellent, but they are also fairly intense color-wise. So you have to do this afterwards in order to actually still be able to see what the name of heck you're doing. So yeah, going over all the small panels. I'm trying to leave the lines between the panels clear to keep the shadows. I guess I technically could have dry brushed too, but my small dry brush is sort of done for at the moment. And I only have a large one, it's like almost a bit over a centimeter in diameter, and it's too big for these tiny things. So I was also doing some, I forgot to put the color up for it, but I'm also doing some ever slight edge highlighting with a matte white. Once I'm done with this, it's not a lot, just a few places, just putting a little bit of highlight on. It helps sell the idea that this is a thing that actually exists in the world, because flat colors, as nice as they are it's hard to sell that they're real, so to speak. Now, of course, in these mechs, there's no problem anyway, because they are supposed to be 12 meters tall, so you literally can't get lines fine enough for this. Compare it to a regular 28mm model, which is like supposed to be a human being, which is 2 meters tall. There's a difference. I tend to come back to this and complain a lot when I do bases, because I just get stuck on the whole idea that trees, they're supposed to be the size of trees. But yeah, there's not much more to say about it. We're going over all the panel lines, all the panels, all the panels. And this is one of these moments where you want to paint a bit more runny, not a lot more runny, but a little bit runny, and you want to go slow. Because the faster you go here, the more sad you get, because everything just goes bad. Of course, these two are easy because they have a lot of very distinct panel lines. So it's easy to tell the panels apart. Also, using a fine brush does help. But technically you can do this with a starter brush. I have done it on other mechs, it's doable. The brush I have now came with the paint kit. I got the big collector's paint kit, which has pretty much all the basic paints, standard paints, and effect paints from Armor Painter. Some people wonder why did I do that? Well, because I needed a lot of new paints anyway, because my paints were drying out, and I got a good deal on it. Otherwise, I think it's a bit overpriced. You don't need all those colors, but it was a one-time easy investment, and I kind of like that. So yeah, this brush, nothing special. It's the very basic mass-produced brush. You don't need fancy brushes. Fancy brushes help, And when you know what you're doing, fancy brushes can make the job easier. You don't need fancy brushes. In fact, when you start out, I would strongly suggest against getting fancy brushes, because you will be sad when your fancy brush gets completely... You see here? No, I'm lifting it out of screen. Terribly sorry. See, I caught myself for what I was doing. But yeah, brushes. Don't get the fanciest brushes. Get cheap art store brushes to begin with, because you're going to go through them. You are going to tear those up anyway, and it's a lot easier on the soul to tear up a brush costing $1 than a brush costing $10 or whatever your equivalent money is. You can see both of them lines picked up. They're now starting to look fairly good actually. We're going to move on to detail work, and I say we're going to use demonic yellow, pure red, and matte black for that. Again, we are now going to go carefully and slowly. See, I start off with the basic brush. It's doable. This one is starting to become a bit old, so it's a bit frazzled. It doesn't really agree with me anymore. So I'm going to switch over to the detail brush later on. But as I say, it's doable. It's very doable. You see there, now I switch because the bristles have started to separate quickly. This is sad. It means the brush is going out. But it happens. The detail brush in this specific case is helpful, but you could do it with a steady hand and a starter brush too. Now, I'm not a big fan of painting all white, because white is one of these difficult colors. But I think it's turned out pretty well anyway. I'm fairly happy with it. Now, the idea here is to mimic the design of the VF1 fighters, or their mecha stage of their how they look. And of course, Rick Hunter's is white with red striping, and around the legs, and some fins that we don't have here, but I painted the panels instead to represent those. And as you're going to see later, we also have red on the chest part. Unfortunately, that is pretty much all the detail there is to his mech, because a lot of it is made of airplane parts that no longer exist in this one. There is an air-land mech version. We don't talk about the air-land or land-air mechs. We don't talk about those. They are terrible. But basically, they were based on the Gearwalk, the half and half version. It's an interesting idea. Very interesting idea. I'm going to do that leg, but I'm not going to show it on camera because it's basically just the exactly same thing again. Instead, we move on to painting the chest detail. Yeah, as you can see, it's looking surprisingly clean. I could go in if I wanted to and add some thin black lines to deepen the red a bit more, but I decided to go against that because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah, for all intents and purposes, I'm actually really happy how this came out. It's very efficient. An efficient paint job, I think. Has good impact, good visible impact, because we put those down, you can see them on the shelf from around the shelf is the other side of the room. They pop. Thanks to the white and the color accents, they really pop. So, surprisingly happy with it actually. Now, I don't have any more of these, but if I had more of these, I could do up the rest of the gang too. But trick is to say to stay within the lines. Of course, I also need to paint the feet. I almost forgot the feet. First, it was like, it's almost done. Like, no, feet aren't done yet. But they're just black, so that's just slap the paint on and then go over with some grey later on, some quick dry brushing. Nothing more complicated than that. Same goes for the rifle and the arm, because usually these guys carry the rifle in like a proper rifle, but on the Battletech mix now it's attached to the arm. And I usually paint mine silver because I like silver things, but staying true to the original material here, we actually painted them black instead. Now, as you can see here, we have two colors in place. So we have two icons in the left corner, the demonic yellow and the matte black, because we are now going to paint Roy Fokkers. He's the leader for Skull Squadron. He's had adornments of skulls and a yellow and black color scheme. You're going to see me trying to paint a skull later. That is not pretty, but it could have been worse. Could have gone worse. Demonic yellow is a very crisp, sharp yellow. A cold yellow, if that makes sense. I was going with a more golden yellow first, but I felt like all the designs I saw online, this and my memory of it, is a very sharp yellow. It's one of these important things you need to take into account, because there's a difference. This is a very sharp, cold yellow. It gives a sense of almost hazard yellow. Not self-luminescent yellow, but this sort of yellow they use in the hazard tapes and things like that. That's kind of nice. It's a nice yellow. Could have gone in and highlighted a bit with another yellow, but I felt that, well, things are going so well, so let's not do things you don't need to do. The risk of messing things up are way too big as there are. And the chest here give me the problems because it's not a clear area for the black to go, so just carefully lined the yellow under yellow with black, and it turned out surprisingly good actually. I was happy with that. And of course, I painted in the fake canopy, which is on the original. The Robotech designed this airplane canopy. Here we carefully go in and try and paint a skull on it, which failed horribly, but I left it be anyway because it didn't look. From afar, it looks okay. It does what it's supposed to do. It's up close. It looks like a blob. Yeah. I also forgot to paint his feet, but I come back to that later. We will get the feet painted, don't worry. You see, I mean, it's starting to look like something now. I kind of like that. We're now in the finishing up stage, where we're going to paint the cockpit windows with the goblin green. And we are going to paint the metallic areas, and we are going to gem the lenses in the weapons. I don't think I got on camera when I lensed the recounter one, the Stinger, but it is what it is. You get the idea. You're gonna see by looking at the Valkyrie what I do. So what I do here is I apply a slightly very wet down glob of green paint and let it dry in, sink in on its own. I put a dot of white in both gun barrels to be ready for the inks later, which I use to get the gemmed effect. That is a quick way to do it. You put a dot of white in, wipe off, and then you pour in a ink. And they will give you this sort of 3D effect. Very nice. We also highlight a little bit, because highlighting is important. And it's just a quick mix of spaceship exterior with a little bit of little nudge of black in it to take it down a bit. Now it's time to apply Poisonous Cloud to get sort of highlights in the cockpit area, to make sure that you get this sensation of light hitting glass I'm not a big fan of gemming cockpits, but people seem to think this is important. So, and in this case, it is important because this is how they are designed in the show. They have green visors, so in this case, it makes sense. Normally, I like to have gold instead because I like the idea of them having plates, not see-through windows, but actual plates covering, looking out. Right, so you can see how I apply gemming sort of on the panel by dripping in a good chunk of blue tone and then let it dry, and we'll get a nice gem-mac finish. So, adding some final metal parts, and that will pretty much be it for this actually. So, I do hope that you have enjoyed this painting thing with me talking. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to do talking or music, so please drop below if you like music or talking. And here are the beauty shots. Aren't those beautiful? I think they are. Anyway, stay safe, be kind, and play fair. Bye.